Age of Camelot, as the Kennedy family and admirers like to remember the brief reign of President John F. Kennedy. When Camelot came to its tragic end, Hickory Hill was a sanctuary for grieving and for reigniting the idealism that brought a Kennedy to the White House in the first place. By 1968, it was time to try again, but it was a far different time in America. When Robert F. Kennedy left his home 25 years ago to run for president, this was a nation deeply divided by a war in a far-off land and by radical changes in our values here at home. He was just 42 years old, forever young in our memories. Hello, I'm Tom Brokaw. Robert Kennedy was killed 25 years ago, but he's once again a part of our lives, with the help of his wife Ethel, who shares memories of him as she seldom has before. His brother Ted, his sister Jean. The people who knew him best will tell us in their own words about his devotion to family, how he was a champion of the poor even though he came from great privilege. Was he as ruthless as his reputation? We'll learn about his single-minded drive to win without any thought of losing. We'll also learn why, 25 years later, he remains such a presence, why there's a political legacy in America so strong, so personal. It is known simply by his first name, Bobby.
The glorious people who were on that train, everyone who you loved or held dear and who had given so much of their time to make Bobby president was a very happy thought.
I stood guard over the coffin on the train, and I could see all the people behind me because it was the last car. And I just thought, well, this man touched him in some way.
One of the most poignant memories that I have of the impact of my father's political career was after he died. I was inside the train, and almost continuously the whole way, the train tracks were just packed with people. They were all kinds of people. A lot of them were crying. A lot of them were waving signs, that said, "Goodbye, Bobby."
I first saw him in the big living room. His sister and I were roommates at college, assigned by the nuns.
Ethel was my roommate. And then we went skiing. That's where actually they met.
It was love at first sight.
I think it was, on her part.
Well, then it was rather unfortunate he liked my sister.
He took out Pat, who was very attractive, wonderful girl.
So that wasn't too much fun.
So he invited her to go to Florida, and then Ethel got me to invite her. And so I did.
Well, I just thought he was great.
I think they were very complimentary because she was so outgoing. Well, he said that he was very much in love with Ethel and he'd like to marry her. And what did I think his chances were? And I said, well, I'm not sure because I think Ethel might want to be a nun. And he said, well, I can compete against anyone, but I can't compete against God.
It was just beautiful. It had been raining very, very hard for about 2.5 weeks before. And then it dawned, just a glorious, clear day, just one of those pristine days.
His life really seemed to all of us to revolve primarily around his family, his brother, brothers and football.
Bobby played a fair amount. He started at end in the 1947 season.
At Harvard, where all of the players were much larger, many of them faster, many of them more gifted and talented, but he was one that made the team.
He started against Western Maryland, and the score was about 40-0 or something like that. He was playing in, and it was a pass, and he caught it, went for a touchdown. He broke his leg in practice the following week. But when the Yale game came along in November, he still had the cast on. But the only way you get your letter in those days was to play in the Yale game.
And he played the Harvard-Yale game with a broken leg and got his letter.
Well, the 1950s were a curious decade. President Eisenhower was indeed one of the oldest men ever to be president up to that point. And one felt a rather smug country run by old men. The phrase at the time was, it was the bland leading the bland.
Jack asked him to run his Senate campaign. It was with some reluctance that he did it, because his own career was taking off. So it took him a little while to go along with it. But once he made the decision, he was there all the time.
I just remember him, khaki pants, loafers, blue shirt, rolled up, and he always had a sort of a tan. He looked like a boy there, 26 years old. And there he was, running this whole campaign.
He could see that that was going to be his life. He accommodated himself to that, and it became his life, and it didn't bother him. He sort of thrived on making his brother first.
For 5 months, we worked side by side during Jack's campaign for the United States Senate against Henry Cabot Lodge. He was so tough. Some of these Pauls would come in just to see how it was going, and Bobby would give them a pencil and say, come on, sit down and address some envelopes. And I said one day, Bobby, when this is all over, you won't have a friend in Massachusetts. And he said, I don't care whether they like me or not, as long as they vote for Jack.
Well, I guess you're glad it's over, aren't you, Bobby? I am, Jack. Okay.
I never met a man who was so dedicated to the success of his brother as Bobby was to Jack.
Group in the State Department of sabotaging our foreign policy. Now, let me say this. You can buy spies. The little fellow who will sell his country for 30 pieces of silver.
Joe McCarthy and these kind of scattershot accusations of disloyalty which McCarthy spread about, which many people, in a sense, deferred to, even President Eisenhower for a while. Robert Kennedy worked for a time for the McCarthy Committee.
The American people are
When Joe McCarthy returned from the war, he was a genuine hero. And he used to come up to Hyannisport, and he took out some of Bobby's sisters. And so, he'd be up there playing the games, whatever we do. And one day we were sailing, and I don't know, everybody threw him overboard thinking that was funny to see how long he could take it underwater. And he was holding on to a line on the stern of the boat, and people kept putting their legs on his shoulders and pushing him down. And he'd come up eventually, but with a great smile on his face. So none of us realized how dangerous it was, but he couldn't swim. But when he got down here, and then I think he got involved in all that press and publicity, something turned him, and he wasn't the same man.
Senator Kennedy was concerned about his brother going to work for McCarthy, but I have to say it was not because he was strongly opposed to Joe McCarthy ideologically. It was because he thought it would be confusing and possibly harmful politically. But Bobby was very much his own man and took the job.
Robert Kennedy had gone to work for Senator Joe McCarthy
for a period of 5 months. During that period, he had conducted one investigation on behalf of the committee into the subject of trade between the United States and Communist China.
And there were also other company involved.
There was another company involved.
A British company.
British company of Hong Kong.
I may say that I completely agree with the observations just made. It seems just unbelievable, the use of British-owned vessels to transport communist troops.
During that period, he became totally disillusioned with the investigative techniques applied by Roy Cohn.
I therefore conclude that Senator McCarthy's charges and insinuations are not only false, but utterly irresponsible, and under the circumstances reveal a shocking disregard for the interests of our country.
He went to Senator McCarthy and complained, was extremely critical of Cohn. McCarthy made it clear to him that he was happy with Cohn, and Bob resigned.
He thought, too, that he was unwell at the time, that Joe McCarthy was unwell.
Opening session of the Senate Investigating Subcommittee at the National Capitol to determine...
And then later, when he was the Democratic minority on the McCarthy Committee, and during the Army McCarthy hearings, Bob was their counsel.
Let's try it once more, Mr. Cohn.
I can't give you his exact...
Did he say in substance, how would you like it if we...
Point of order? Yes, I've been trying to be very patient with Mr. Welch here, but I think he should not repeatedly interrupt the witness. When he doesn't like the answer, he butts in and starts to ask another question.
When, after those hearings, a decision was made to condemn McCarthy, the Democrats wrote up their plan, their bill, and the Republicans wrote theirs. Bob Kennedy wrote the Democratic thing.
I am very happy to have this circus ended so that we can get back to the work of digging out communism, corruption.
Carried with him through his life, particularly among liberals, condemned him because he had, quote, worked for McCarthy, unquote.
Joe McCarthy died on May 2nd, 1957, of cirrhosis of the liver. On the day of the funeral, my assignment, as not surprisingly, was to cover the politicians who were there. Bobby Kennedy. He didn't want to be seen. He didn't hide exactly, but he rarely got out of the car all day long. He listened to the ceremonies from the car, and he just stayed in the background. Then we drove back to the Green Bay Airport, and as he got out, he said, I don't want to tell you how to write your story, but he said if you saw fit not to mention that I was here, I'd appreciate it.
I met him in 1957 before I went to the Soviet Union, and everything he said was negative. There'll be spies everywhere, you won't get anything. It was very black or white, and it was all black from his point of view. At the same time, you sensed that this was a man who used power, was ready to use it, which led to people calling him ruthless later. But I think in the very beginning, I saw that combination of a man deeply moral in his approach to issues and really ready to use power.
I went to work for Collier's Magazine, and they asked me to start doing an investigation on the Teamsters Union. I picked up a Herald Tribune and saw that the Senate was creating a committee to look into labor racketeering, and that Robert Kennedy was going to be the chief counsel.
John McClellan had known Robert Kennedy during the Army McCarthy hearings, and he asked Robert Kennedy to serve as the chief counsel of this committee.
My father was against that because he thought he had a political future. They had that one argument, which is about whether Bobby should go in to investigate the rackets, and he hoped he'd go into public life someday, and he thought that this might be something that would ricochet back on him, and that it would probably not do him any good to investigate the unions because he would need union support if he ever ran for public office.
In the code, it's stated that it is the policy of the AFL-CIO.
The Teamsters Union was the greatest and grossest offender, and ultimately the committee, much of the committee's work centered on first Dave Beck from Seattle, Washington, who was then the president of the union, who subsequently was convicted of crimes and went to jail. And then on Jimmy Hoffa.
At that point, I was named chief investigator of the committee. And so we had our first meeting with Jimmy Hoffa. And Hoffa was in total anger. And he suddenly looked at me and he said, "You better tell Bobby that he's not going to make his brother president by killing Hoffa."
Bob was pushing this thing constantly. He was the motivating force behind this. He never let up from the beginning of the investigation to the end. Really pushing the staff, pushing the committee into hearings, too.
One night, I must have been about 8 o'clock. We left the office, he went and got his car, and we started out to go to his house for dinner. And as we drove by the Teamsters Union building, we looked up there and saw that Jimmy Hoffa's office, there was a light in there. And Bobby said to me, "Well, if he's working, we got to work." So he turns around, we go back to the office and get our work done.
Jimmy was trying to bribe a member of Bob's staff, Cy Chasty. Chasty had made the contact with Bob Kennedy and told him that Hoffa had made this approach.
Hoffa was always impatient for more information. He wanted specifics, who was going to do what. He wanted the whole schmear of what they were doing at the committee. I got to Kennedy and told him what was going on, and they set up an elaborate surveillance team. And that was the night that they arrested Hoffa in the hotel, and it blew up all over the place. Edward Bennett Williams was the very prominent attorney in Washington, D.C. He was called by Hoffa the night that Hoffa was arrested. Thing like that, and he showed up and arranged bail and preliminary hearing and stuff like that. We went to trial in the latter part of June of 1957.
In that courtroom, it was very quiet in there, and you could see the atmosphere of seriousness.
I didn't even know who Hoffa was when they brought all these people. There were a number of them there, and who the attorneys were. I learned that which one was Hoffa. He was a shorter man. And one thing I noticed about him, what I found out later, he wore white socks, so I could never lose him.
I was called as a witness. After I had put my case in, it took a couple of days, Edward Bennett Williams arose to his feet and in his most professorial manner started to put me down.
Williams' cross-examination of Cy Chasty was brutal.
Williams emphasized the fact that I was an attorney, that Hoffa hired me as an attorney, that he paid me as an attorney. Obviously, he was trying to put together a defense of that Hoffa had confided in me to do this work as a lawyer, not as an investigator. I got off the stand and Bob Kennedy took the stand.
Kennedy, as I saw him, was a very composed person. And he sat there and to me, he did not take his eyes off Bennett Williams at all. He just, just stared at him.
He didn't fight. He didn't spar. He just answered the question.
When Mr. Kennedy was being examined, I did glance over at Hoffa. He did look at him. No smile. In fact, maybe, I'm not sure if I could really interpret it as a sneer.
Edward Bennett Williams, he was examining Bobby Kennedy about his having met with Jimmy Hoffa. Bobby Kennedy was meeting with him preparatory for his testimony before the committee. He seemed very embarrassed.
I went up to the office to see him, and I said, "Bob, something's not going right in this trial, and we could have a chance to lose it." "Oh, you're wrong. You can't be. With all we've got, your story, all the corroboration, we can't lose." Well, as history shows, we lost.
Well, the courtroom just went up like if it was gasoline thrown, and then everybody was hollering. I'll never forget remembering hearing somebody back in the back hollering, "God save the king, God save the king."
Next day I saw Bob. "We'll get the son of a bitch yet." Don't worry about it. That's what he said. We'll get the son of a bitch yet.
It's amazing how it grew and grew. That little company you started in your garage. And now you've got an automobile whose drive for quality matches your own. The Buick Park Avenue Ultra. With its supercharged engine, the Park Avenue Ultra is proof you still take pride in what comes out of your garage.
She hasn't seen Richard in months. She's almost forgotten his smile. Her train is 4 hours late. Her name is Alyssa. And she's constipated. Get over it. Get X-Lax. It's a pill, it's gentle, and it works. Get X-Lax. Get regular.
Better get a hefty. And we mean hefty.
Both Visa and American Express Gold cards can get you to La Roche-Guyon, one of the prettiest towns in France. But should something go wrong here, only Visa Gold can get you out.
You had to come to France, right?
Don't start, Marty.
Because La Roche-Guyon's only towing service
No, we're not getting a tow truck. I can get this out.
doesn't take American Express.
Oui?
Visa Gold, delivering what really matters.
Jamal's from.
Honey, that means I eat France.
Oh.
It's everywhere you want to be.
It's good humor time. Girls, hit it.
Chocolate eclair, strawberry shortcake, toasted almond,
And chocolate candy crunch. Hey, the name will take you back. The taste will take you away.
Go ahead, make a wish. Then share it with your Allstate agent, who knows planning makes wishes come true, and who can outline a life insurance plan to assure family security and college funding and a comfy retirement are in the stars for you. So make your wish and trust it to your Allstate agent, who wants to be your agent for life.
Sunday, witness a skier take an incredible fall.
First thing he asked me, is your leg broken?
Meet the survivor and the heroes in this miraculous rescue. Eyewitness video, NBC Sunday at 8:30.
Michael Jackson, Rod Stewart, Tina Turner. We have your exclusive backstage pass to the World Music Awards on the next Entertainment Tonight.
Monday night at 7.
Her choice between two men ended in a crash of gunfire at the Indianapolis Speedway. Murder at the Indy 500 on hard copy.
Monday at 7:30.
The nation came to know Robert F. Kennedy through television. In 1957, he was chief counsel of the Senate Labor Rackets Committee. His brother, John Kennedy, the senator, was also a member of that committee. And the Kennedy family was already discussing the presidential election 3 years off. Joe Kennedy, the powerful and influential father of the Klan, had reservations about his sons taking on labor. But Bobby Kennedy was obsessed with Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamsters boss. And the exchanges between the rough labor leader and the cool Kennedy brothers, those exchanges were early lessons in the power of this medium to create political stars.
Have you had any business dealings with him?
No.
We had testimony regarding the membership of some of these locals, Mr. Hoffa. They were completely exploited by the union officials. They're getting substandard wages, and there was collusion between the union officials and the employers.
When I was growing up, I thought Teamsters was synonymous for bad guy. My mother would say, no, that just means a truck driver. But in fact, when we were 3 and 4 years old, my mother would take Joe and my brother Bobby to the Senate racket hearings when my father was investigating what was going on in the Teamsters with Jimmy Hoffa.
Mr. Hoffa, I'm not asking you just about one discussion. I'm saying that you met and discussed with Mr. Dio a number of different times during this period of time. It amazes me that you have such a poor memory about your relationship with Johnny Dio.
Well, it may amaze you, but I assure you that my memory, as the best that I can recall at this moment, is such that I cannot recall those conversations. Now, you're
There had been testimony which indicated that Hoffa had misused union funds, had engaged in conflicts of interest, had suppressed union democracy, and had associated with underworld figures and tried to use underworld figures for his own benefit and for their benefit.
You betrayed the union membership.
Well, I say that is not true, and I say you have no foundation for any such a statement, and you produce it to this public
Well,
hearing.
now I'll ask you the question.
You produce the statement. All right, ask the question.
All right, now number one.
It was, in a very real sense, high theater, tense, compelling drama.
Yeah, well, now that would be fine. Then you get back, you say that the man has to be convicted, and then we give you the sample of Glenn Smith,
Now,
who
just a
says
moment.
he took $20,000 of union funds to make a payoff, and you haven't taken any action against him.
Mr. Kennedy, I am very familiar with politics and organized labor leading to the expulsion not
The
only...
air was electric when Hoffa and Kennedy confronted each other across that table.
No question about Mr. Goldblatt.
Oh, wait a minute, just a moment. Don't say anything about a question about Hoffa. There is no question about Hoffa, and don't you say that either.
Evidently, you agree the same thing, Mr. Hoffa. Wait a minute. Or otherwise, you wouldn't have said, don't put me in their class.
Don't you put me in a class that they're tagged. That's what I said. And I say tagged.
It was clear that Jimmy Hoffa despised Robert Kennedy. I mean, there was not just contempt, there was hatred on Jimmy Hoffa's part.
Would you take due process away from him because of that?
No, but I want to get the answers, Mr. Hoffa.
Well, you can't get them for somebody who's not going to guess for you, and I won't guess for you.
This is just a general pattern for you.
Well, that's your man. That's what you think.
Bob told me later that during questioning by other senators, Hoffa would have his eyes locked on Kennedy as if he were trying to burn holes through him. And I asked Bob, was it disconcerting to you? And he said, yes, it was.
But I do believe also that such a man does not necessarily have the right to be an officer.
There's no doubt about the fact that John and Robert serving together and appearing together in the Rackets Committee investigation was a help to both, including a help to John and his national prospects.
But the only man that you're able to indicate that you've taken any action against is Mr. Feldman.
Now, you know that isn't true, Senator.
Well, I'm
a
asking
list,
you for the
sir,
facts.
that I submitted right here to you.
It was a situation made to order for Bobby. John, as a member of the committee, received some reflected glory from Bobby's stardom.
You went up to Boston and stated that I couldn't find my way out of a four-room apartment if it had 12 doors.
Concerning labor movements, sir.
On matters dealing with labor legislation.
That's right.
But I must say, after listening to your explanation, I'm not convinced that you would be very much better shape in that room.
When it was all over, legislation was introduced, the Landrum-Giffen bill, which did outlaw many of the practices that the committee had uncovered.
During the period of the operation of this committee,
Bob resigned from his position as chief counsel of the committee in July 1959 and went on to write his book, The Enemy Within, and to take over the campaign of his brother for the presidency of the United States.
He lost his job as far as I was concerned. He left the Senate Racket hearings. He didn't have a job. And I thought, oh my God, he's unemployed. What will we do?
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
John F. Kennedy would not have considered having anyone other than Robert Kennedy as his campaign manager when he ran for president. He knew that Robert could totally be trusted, that Robert had no agenda other than the election of his brother.
To be a good campaign manager, you have to be tough. And everybody knew he was tough, and he was not going to compromise. If you're going to win, there's ways to do it. And Bob Kennedy knew the way to do it.
I think that we have a great deal of work.
He was always playing the bad cop to some extent, the enforcer. That was where he really got the reputation of ruthless, which was not the real Bob Kennedy, but that was certainly part of what he thought he had to do for JFK.
Robert Kennedy had the Kennedy campaign for the 1960 National Convention, organized unlike any convention campaign in the history as far as I know. He had one or more persons in our intimate group assigned to every single delegation. And they were to meet every single morning and report to Robert Kennedy on where things stood, how many votes in each of those delegations, because we had to win on the first ballot.
To lead us to a fruitful America
quite where it was going to go. Lyndon Johnson was an active candidate and was going to come in with a large number of votes, delegates, and Adlai Stevenson was also a candidate.
We're watching the convention, the nominations, and it's just Jack and myself and the father.
I submit to you the man who is the favorite son of 50 states.
When Eugene McCarty made that great speech for Adlai Stevenson,
Adlai Stevenson of Illinois!
Crowds are flocking on the floor, they're coming off the balcony, and the father said, Jack, what the hell is going on? And Jack said, call Bobby, and I called the command post, and Bobby just said, tell the candidate Adlai has everything going for him but delegates.
Mr. Chairman, California cast 33½ votes for Kennedy.
Bobby had figured out, even with states passing and waiting and yielding, that it would fall on Wyoming. My brother had 10 votes. There was a total of 15. So he said, talk to Tracy McCracken and say, if those 5 votes, any of those 5 votes would make the difference, him gaining the nomination, will you give the whole delegation to him?
Jack looked over and he could see his brother Teddy in the middle of the Wyoming delegation. And Jack turned to me and said, this could be it.
Wyoming's vote will make a majority for Senator Kennedy.
After Kennedy won the nomination, it seemed a nice thing to do to bring the party together by offering the vice presidential job to Lyndon Johnson, who had, next to Kennedy, the largest number of delegates.
Jack made the call himself. Bobby, as soon as he heard that he offered it to Lyndon, he was terribly upset.
Robert Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson never hit it off. There was just some adverse chemical reaction between them.
I remember going into the room and Bobby and Jack talking and talking and talking and talking.
They intended it as a pro forma offer. They never dreamed that Johnson would accept it. Johnson thought about it and talked with his friends and then stunned the Kennedys by saying, yes, he would accept it.
I think, quite frankly, historically, that Boston-Austin axis worked in that 1960 campaign.
In October, in the last weeks of the election, John and Robert discovered they were in deep trouble with the black voters. My first role was saying, you ought to know the key people, the key players, and spend some time with them. That included Martin Luther King. With Martin Luther King, we had a real disadvantage in that Daddy King was an ardent Baptist who did not want a Catholic in the White House, and in fact signed a full-page ad of Baptist preachers and others for Richard Nixon.
Martin had been asked to sit in with students at the lunch counter downtown in Riches in Atlanta, and he agreed to do so. After he agreed to do so, of course, he was arrested, and is expected to be arrested. All of the students came out of jail, and they kept Martin Luther King Jr. because they said that he had a traffic violation and he had violated his probation. The judge sentenced him to 6 months hard labor in Reidsville State Penitentiary. I had this telephone call from then Senator Kennedy, and he inquired of my well-being and said he was concerned about my husband and thinking about me, that he wanted me to know that if there was anything that he could do to be helpful, to please let him know.
Bob Kennedy was going to upstate New York, and I drove him to the airport, and he said, I think I should call that judge and give him a piece of my mind, tell him exactly what I have in mind, why I think it's wrong. And I said, if I were you, I wouldn't do it. I would forget it. And when I put him on the airplane, I was certain that I had talked him out of it.
The next we heard a member of the Kennedy family had interceded with the judge of DeKalb County as to why Martin Luther King Jr. could not have bail, because we wanted to get him out of prison.
I got a call from our head of our Southern forces in Georgia, and I'm using a word that I never use myself, but he said, I got on the phone, he was screaming. I said, what the hell's going on? What are you screaming about? He said, let that nigger out of jail. You let that goddamn nigger out of jail. God, you lost us the campaign. Kiss the South goodbye. Call Bobby. Find Bobby.
Kennedy called in, and I said, that crazy judge down there says, you telephoned him, and I've denied it. He said, take the denial back.
Daddy King was saying that night, you know, I never voted for a Catholic before. I never thought I could. But, you know, if I had a sack full of votes, I'd take them up to Washington, put them at the feet of Senator John F. Kennedy.
Now begins the exquisite agony of waiting to see how it all turned out.
It was a great night. Bobby had set up a command post. It was perfect. They had telephone lines to key people in key states. In fact, Bobby's election returns were running ahead of NBC and CBS and ABC and all the others.
Here is an indication why Kennedy has won New York State.
All the news is great. And now, around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, we're standing still at 240.
A few votes apart, but these are only...
And the magic number is 269.
As soon as he sensed it was that close, Bobby went right to work. He said, we need this, this, and this. If we don't get those things by 11 o'clock, I'm going to call the Southern electors. They had independent electors that could swing the election.
It's around 3 in the morning, and it's Bobby, Ken O'Donnell, and myself. And Michigan came in with 20, and now it's 261. And about 5 in the morning, Bobby was there, Ken O'Donnell was drinking Heineken, and Minnesota came in with 11, and now it's 272, the magic number being 269.
At 7:19 a.m. Eastern Time, Senator Kennedy was elected President of the United States.
We left Bobby there. He said, no, I'm going to wait a little while. So there's Bobby, the only one in the command post that had started off with 40 people handling the phones and downstairs celebrating. But Bobby's operation was superb.
I had lunch with Robert Kennedy the day he agreed to be Attorney General. He seemed rather rueful and fatalistic about it. I don't think he wanted particularly to become Attorney General. He said he'd spent enough of his life as counsel for the Rackets Committee in chasing bad men, and he didn't want to spend several more years doing it.
He made visits to some of his old, and I mean more mature friends. John McClellan, J. Edgar Hoover. Only Hoover had suggested that he do it. He telephoned the president-elect and said, I've seen all these people, and I don't think I should do it.
He did not want to do it. Not at all. No, it took every ounce of Jack's charm and persuasion, everything.
So early the next morning, cold, snow on the ground, barely after sunup, we drove in to the house in Georgetown. The porters out front, and we had breakfast. Bob said, Johnny, let's talk about me. And the president said, the only answer is for you to be the Attorney General of the United States. And so that's the way we'll do it. And do you want some more coffee? Yes, I do, Senator. And he got up and went out to get the coffee. While he was out, Bob said to me, I've got some points I need to make. And I said, I think all the points have been made. And he came back in, the president came back in with the coffee pot and said, that's it, General, let's grab our balls and go. The president then was going to walk out onto the front stoop of the Georgetown house and announce to the press with the Attorney General at his side that he was going to be the Attorney General. And just before we went out, the president looked at him and said, all right, Bobby, we're ready to comb your hair before we go out.
I have sought the most qualified men of ability, determination, and a desire to serve their country.
I thought he had worked every living minute for his brother, day and night, and that whatever Jack gave him was deserved.
I am pleased to accept the position of the Attorney Generalship of the United States.
What? This is not working.
I can get a temp, but the temp won't know the software.
No, I got it. I just can't open it.
Changing the vertical alignment will change.
Oh, nobody knows it. Nobody uses it.
An insertion point. What?
Consider the interest you're paying on your credit card. Thanks to Smart Rate from the Discover card, there's a chance to go lower. Now, the more you choose the Discover card when making purchases, the lower your rate can go. And since there's still no annual fee, that's a whole new bottom line. Smart Rate, currently as low as 14.9%. It pays to Discover, the card that pays you back.
It has a theft deterrent system to help protect you from bad guys. A bumper-to-bumper warranty to protect you for 3 years or 36,000 miles. And Scotch Guard on the seats and carpet to protect you from cheeseburgers. The new Camaro. What else would you expect from the country that invented rock and roll?
This is for your Big Mac, right? First one that misses?
Watches the winner eat lunch. Got it.
Off the floor, off the scoreboard, off the bank board, no rim.
Over the second rafter, off the floor, nothing but net.
What you want is what you get. $2 today.
Off the expressway, over the river, off the billboard, through the window, nothing but net.
She's an honor student, yet she flunked a simple test. Home pregnancy, kids having kids. What's a parent to do? America Close Up has some answers on NBC Nightly News Monday.
You give me fever.
This week, musical guest Madonna joins host Harvey Keitel on Saturday Night Live.
The Knicks have taken a 2-0 lead. Now the world champion Bulls return home for the pivotal game of the series. Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Saturday.
You've driven these streets 1,000 times. But tonight, there's something different. Tonight, you're using Exxon 93 Supreme gasoline for a cleaner engine, smooth acceleration, and a full 93 octane.
Let the tiger set you free.
Rely on Exxon Supreme.
Rely on the tiger.
Bill Clinton, just another Jimmy Carter, Saturday at 7.
John F. Kennedy had been elected president, but just barely, so as he brought a new generation to power, he was tempered by the realities of his narrow win. But there were some issues that could not be ignored. Civil rights, the cities. They demanded boldness. As Attorney General, Robert Kennedy was determined to give new meaning to the place of justice in America. And his life here at Hickory Hill was changing as well. Bobby and Ethel Kennedy and their children, 7, eventually 11, they were like camp counselors to the new frontier. For Robert Kennedy, his life was filled with challenges, but also with great promise.
You can't talk about Robert Kennedy in any significant way without talking about Ethel Kennedy and the family, because that was the centerpiece of Robert Kennedy's life.
Before the children would go off to school, he always played 20 minutes to a half hour. They played football every morning, or at least threw the ball. That was a way of having a relationship with them, too.
There were always a lot of animals at Hickory Hill. Dogs and cats and domestic fowl. There were kinkages, which is like a South American honey bear. Coatimundis, which is like a raccoon-like animal.
I asked the British ambassador how long he had known Bobby and Ethel. He said, well, I knew them back in the days when the dogs outnumbered the children.
Occasionally my mother would bring one of the horses or a donkey into the house.
You know, it's Mommy that brings the horse into the living room, and it's Mommy that, you know, turns the lights off and puts the pig covered with grease into the dining room.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
What may we refer to now as the Attorney General, or can't wait till tomorrow morning? Kennedy or Bob? Sandy, for you.
In those years, people can't imagine that in the 60s, this is where the social life and the gayness of Washington was all in the area of the Kennedys. Everything was so festive and frolic, and people had parties, and it was a good time.
And I think this is absolutely essential. The local authorities haven't been able, for one reason or another, to deal with the problem.
He was very impatient, particularly with investigators that weren't doing their job or trying to do things that were not important and not productive. He could be very, very tough. But if people, in a sense, talked back to him or told him what their views were, he respected dissent.
Robert Kennedy, next to the president, was certainly the most important and powerful figure in the United States.
James Meredith filed his lawsuit to get into the University of Mississippi on January 20, 1961, timed with the inauguration of President Kennedy. And I told Bob Kennedy about it and told him that this was trouble for some time in the future.
I don't think Robert Kennedy fully understood at that time the schism that existed in the South, the hatred, the scars, the stains, racism that was so deeply embedded in the American South. I think he was cautious also. He didn't want to do anything to anger Southern politicians.
In the spring of '61, I had been at the University of Georgia just a few months. There had been an awful reception when Hamilton Holmes and I went there in January of that year as the first two black students. We'd gone under court order, and the students rioted outside of my dormitory. What I always found amazing was that he was in fact invited for Law Day because it was the law students who had organized the riot outside of my dorm.
The Honorable Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy.
And I was saying, I wonder how much he knows about what has really gone on here. I wonder if he even knows my name.
The graduation at this university of Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes will without question aid and assist the fight against communist political infiltration and even guerrilla warfare.
I almost couldn't catch my breath. Of course, he was sending a message. He was sending a message to them in that room. Don't you touch them.
Thank you very much.
And I congratulated him on his speech and thanked him. And he was saying, that he was glad to meet me and that he was really glad to be there. And of course, this moment was lost on nobody.
I said, with one stroke of a pen, you can move forward equal opportunity in federal housing in this country. Bob Kennedy and the president both explained to me that the Southern Democrats have said, you cannot sign that and ask us to put through your domestic agenda. He said, and don't you worry, I'm going to sign that order on discrimination in housing. And a few months later, he did. But he let the delay go until popular heat had made him respond.
We left Washington, D.C. on May 4th, 1961, 13 of us, 7 whites and 6 blacks, traveling through the South to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court outlawing segregation in public transportation.
They came to be known from the outset as the Freedom Riders. The first wave of Freedom Riders left Baltimore and traveled through the South and got as far as Anniston, Alabama, where on a tragic Sunday afternoon, the buses they were riding were stopped in the middle of the highway. The buses were bombed and burned. Freedom Riders were mauled and beaten, some of them maimed, and sent back to Birmingham. It was a terrible tragedy. It was a trauma.
We arrived outside of the Birmingham city limits, and Bull Connor, the police commissioner of the city of Birmingham, met the bus. They were arrested and taken to jail.
Other Freedom Riders came in, and the buses went into Birmingham and arrived on Mother's Day, and there were no police there because, according to the police commissioner, they were all home with their mothers, and the mob beat the Freedom Riders.
What Bob Kennedy wanted to know was what could the federal government do. We concocted a lawsuit against the Birmingham police and the Klan.
So Robert Kennedy asked me if I would go down and work it out so that we could get them out of Birmingham. Fortunately, Delta Airlines cooperated, and we got them out of there on the first flight. 3 o'clock in the morning, the Attorney General called me and said, another wave of Freedom Riders has started into Alabama. By the time I got there, Bull Connor had them in jail.
Robert Kennedy got involved in negotiating with the officials of Greyhound and the officials of the state of Alabama to get us out of Birmingham to Montgomery.
Bull Connor protected them to the city limits of Birmingham. When they peeled off, there was no police protection. They had set a trap.
A mob came out of nowhere with baseball bats and lead pipes and chains, and then they turned on all of us. Later that evening, those of us that was not still hospitalized met and decided that we were going to have a mass meeting the next day in Montgomery. We disguised ourselves as members of the Quad. Martin Luther King Jr. and others came to the church.
Martin was inside with the people. The white mob had surrounded the church, and they were not able to, didn't feel it was safe to get out to go home.
And it was at that time that Dr. King went into the basement of the church and made a call to Robert Kennedy and said it was a dangerous mob here. Hundreds of people could be killed that night.
He sent somebody over to the White House with a presidential order for the president to sign that legitimated the role of the marshals in Montgomery.
Troops are on the way into Montgomery now and will be here very soon. They have requested that all of us stay in here.
They did eventually send in the troops during that night, and they got the people home before day in the morning. But that was a very scary night. But
it was a testing moment for the movement, for the South, but for this young administration, really, for this young president, and for this young Attorney General.
This is a very emotional question and creates tremendous problems for people in the southern states, for instance. I think they're just going to have to face up to our responsibilities. And this is 1961, it's not 1861.
The Department of Justice at the time was a very exciting place because here you had an Attorney General who was very, very close to the White House, as close to the White House as anybody could possibly be. He liked to go in his shirt sleeves, walk through the department, drop in on people quite unannounced, ask them what they were doing, what they were up to, what case they had, and so forth.
One of the first things that Bob Kennedy did when he became Attorney General is he set up this Hoffa squad. And their goal was basically to follow up on the Hoffa investigations and other Teamster officials.
There are other things the Department of Justice was doing. He set up a committee on juvenile delinquency, which opened up the whole problem of what to do with young kids growing up in poor and desperate circumstances.
It became apparent that beside running the Department of Justice, that he was going to be sort of a roving center.
In Vietnam, the situation is far more hopeful. The road ahead there appears long and difficult, but the guerrillas are meeting increasingly strong resistance, and in the end, we shall win.
He was going to keep an eye on what was happening in other departments, and that included the Pentagon. Bobby Kennedy was interested in how we were doing, what we were handling in the way of the problems in Southeast Asia.
President Eisenhower had sent advisors there to help the South Vietnamese troops with instruction and technical assistance. And President Kennedy confirmed and reinforced and to some extent increased that commitment.
Robert Kennedy had the same sense that his brother did, that it was basically not our problem. We didn't have a big stake in Southeast Asia commercially or through trade. Robert Kennedy seemed to have a prescience, a sense that we were getting into something that we really didn't know how to cope with without exposing the United States to a major involvement.
What's my day like? The sun comes up and my calls start coming. You want help calling overseas? I'm right here. Your kid needs to call you collect from camp. You need someone who speaks your language? I can help. Now, if you want to trade casserole recipes, my husband is the cook. By sundown, I've helped some people out. And if I'm lucky, there's a casserole waiting on the table.
The iPlan with a smile. AT&T operators.
I used pressure-treated lumber, and I still have $800 in water damage. How come?
Even treated wood needs Thompson's Water Seal waterproofer. Without Thompson's, you're wide open for water damage. Thompson's. Don't wait until it's too late.
Wow, somebody must think I'm special.
'Cause you got Raisin Bran?
Not just Raisin Bran, Post Premium Raisin Bran. With not just lots, but hundreds of big plump raisins.
Look at all I got.
And these flakes, premium, with not just whole wheat bran too.
So it's good for you.
Somebody sure thinks I'm special.
It's me and Mommy.
Post Premium Raisin Bran makes everybody feel like somebody's special.
It's Domino's Pepperoni Cheddar Doubleheader.
Buy a large pepperoni pizza at regular price, get an extra layer with cheddar cheese and extra pepperoni free. Plus a free 2-quart pack of Kool-Aid drink mix with any medium or large pizza order.
Something for nothing.
How about that?
Domino's.
It has a 214 horsepower 24-valve V6. It also has more interior room than a Lexus LS 400. Cab forward design gives it a wide track for aggressive handling. It also has dual airbags and computerized traction control. Introducing the Chrysler LHS. The American luxury car is now in the fast lane.
Next week on Today, an alternative to conventional medicine that might cure you.
Also Michael J. Fox and Ray Charles, so join us next week.
And see what a difference today makes.
They're coming.
We're lost. We're not lost.
Two guys, a 61 Corvette and 2,200 miles.
Oh, sure, that stung a little bit.
Of attitude.
I hate it when that happens.
Join Dan Cortez and James Wilder for Hot Summer Nights on Route 66. Premieres Tuesday, June 8th on NBC.
At issue, your car air conditioner. Each time you turn it on, this chemical gets released.
CFCs go up to the ozone layer where they stay active for almost 120 years.
It's an issue of health.
What we're seeing are increases in cancers.
It's an issue that puts the deep freeze on your pocketbook.
Environmental security has a cost and everybody's going to pay it.
The high price you'll pay for cooling your car. Taking the heat. We're making an issue of it tonight at 11 on the News Tonight.
It's no wonder that Chevy Cavalier is America's favorite first new car. With features like AM/FM stereo, bucket seats, dual sport mirrors, base coat clear coat paint, and a 2.2-liter 110 horsepower engine. Driving a Cavalier RS can make you wish the road would go on forever. And Cavalier also comes equipped with standard anti-lock brakes, just in case it doesn't. Test drive Chevy Cavalier today at your neighborhood Chevrolet dealer.
We've just completed the largest comprehensive audience study in local radio history. Here's what Philadelphia wants in a bright new radio station. Music, all music. All killer songs, all music, no talk. Continuous hits of the 80s and today. No hard rock, no talky DJs. Right here, B101.1. B101.1. All music, very little talk. Tune in now.
You don't need to shop around because no one has lower prices than Silo. Every department is packed with all the top brands and incredible bargains. Like this 13-inch color TV for $134.99. This Sony 8mm camcorder for $599.99. And this Sony portable CD player for $119.99. Of course, other stores will try to beat our low prices, but Silo will beat any price. Guaranteed.
Tom LeMain's weather. Weekdays on Newsday.
Bobby Kennedy was much more than his brother's attorney general, much more than the nation's chief law enforcement officer. He was the administration's enforcer as well. He was utterly at ease with power, and he didn't hesitate to use it. Bobby had no use for the man who occupied the office of Vice President Lyndon Johnson. He humiliated Johnson in large ways and small. Bobby Kennedy served and protected only one political master, his brother, and he did so without apology or reservation.
Those blue eyes could do a lot of things. They could get pretty cold.
He used to make jokes himself. You know, he'd call up, I'd say, who's on the phone? He'd say, it's Ruthless Bobby.
Well, I prefer the word single-minded.
He made fun of that. He thought it was quite funny. I think he liked it.
He had an excellent sense of humor, but underneath that humor there was a certain Irish melancholy.
Joseph Kennedy suffered a stroke in December of 1961. That ended any possibility of his being available, as he had been throughout their lives, as a strong emotional force in support of them. Robert Kennedy was the successor, was the pater familias, not the president. In other words, he succeeded to the position of Joseph Kennedy as the leader of the family.
When my father faced great disappointments, he would just be quiet. He'd get a look in his eye. I remember sitting with him in his room, watching on television as James Meredith tried to enter Ole Miss.
Go home there. Go home there!
The court ordered that Meredith be admitted to the University of Mississippi in the fall term of 1962.
We got Meredith, brought him on the campus, secured him. Pretty soon the students' ranks were filled with men who had come from all over the South, armed and violent.
And so a riot started. I spent the evening talking with President Kennedy and Bobby. I said we just had to have troops.
All the marshals were armed. During the course of that evening, they took a terrible onslaught. Twice they asked for permission to fire back, and twice Bob Kennedy said no.
At one point during the riot, Ed Guthman said to Bob Kennedy,
I said, Bob, it's getting like the Alamo down here.
And Bob Kennedy said, well, you know what happened there.
Ultimately, the United States Army contingent arrived. The next morning, James Meredith became a student at the University of Mississippi.
Two of the single largest issues facing the Kennedy administration in its 3 years were civil rights and the missiles in Cuba.
It was about 8 o'clock in the morning that I went to the White House. Bobby Kennedy was there. I showed the pictures of these missile sites, and Bobby said, boy, this is terrible.
This government
has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
The issues were too great. The survival of the world was potentially at stake. This was an ideal milieu for Robert Kennedy. Almost everyone at the start looked with favor upon the idea of a so-called surgical air strike, in which the U.S. Air Force would swoop down, eliminate the nuclear missiles, fly off, and everything would return to normal.
Robert Kennedy analogized any strike on Cuba, any launching of a major bombing attack or a military landing, to the Pearl Harbor incident at the beginning of World War II as far as the U.S. was concerned.
We believe there are about 25 Soviet ships moving toward Cuba.
They reached a consensus on the blockade. It would take McNamara about 24 hours to get all the ships out there and everything lined up.
It would always be around 11 or midnight, and he'd have a glass of milk and a piece of chocolate cake, and he'd say, it's the children. He kept talking about the children, not our children, but unborn children. I mean, he was really concerned.
He brought the whole thing together. He not only took fairly strong positions, but he attempted to use his persuasive powers.
In the face of U.S. determination, the Soviets dismantled their missiles and bombers and shipped them home. It was the retreat to Moscow.
Robert Kennedy was developing a major political personality, which was far beyond just running the Department of Justice.
There was a tremendous violence in the country in terms of civil rights.
In 1963, President Kennedy committed his presidency to civil rights in spring of 1963. That was occasioned partly by Birmingham.
My husband asked them if they had planned any legislation in the area of civil rights, and they said they didn't think they could get a civil rights bill through to Congress, and they hadn't planned anything. And so he proceeded to tell them about the conditions in Birmingham. Martin said, well, they don't understand. They mean well, but they don't understand. We have to educate them. After the Birmingham campaign was over, President Kennedy proposed a Civil Rights Act, but it took a march on Washington for that bill to become a reality.
I have a dream.
We had the feeling that Kennedy and so many others in the Department of Justice were emerging as sympathetic referees in the struggle for civil rights.
It was November 20th, 1963. Bob was 36 years old. We had a birthday party for him in the Department of Justice, and that night, the annual White House reception for the judges was held, and we were all invited to it and went to the White House.
John Kennedy was giving a reception at the White House that day for the Supreme Court of the United States, and then had left to go to Dallas.
Kennedy said to me, why don't you come out for a quick lunch at Hickory Hill with me and Ethel. We had just sat down there was a card table down at the pool, and they had clam chowder and there was some tuna sandwiches on the table. The phone at the pool rang, and he jumped up, answered the phone. I saw him clap his hand over his mouth, And then came back and said Jack has been shot in Dallas, and he ran up to the house. And then he came back 5 minutes later and said, Jack is dead.
Another day is drawing to a close, and all kinds of people all over the country are heading home for dinner. And no matter who they are, or what they do, or where they make their homes, chances are their favorite dinners have at least one thing in common. Beef. It's what's for dinner.
Maybe you never thought of a backup system for an airbag, but that's how we built the Mazda 626. Because we thought a little extra safety might feel good to you.
Wouldn't you give anything for hair that's shiny and healthy? Blow drying gave me split ends, but Pantene Pro V shampoo and treatment conditioner helped change all that. Pro V contains provitamins which go deep into your hair, giving it extra treatment all the way to the tips. And look, it's so healthy, it shines.
Pantene Pro V shampoo and treatment conditioner for hair so healthy it shines.
It won't happen overnight, but it will happen.
There's a proven winner in mustards. In a nationwide taste test, Hellmann's Dijonnaise Creamy Mustard Blend beat the leading mustard by 2 to 1.
You know, when I opened up that lunchbox and I saw that my sweetheart had made that ham sandwich with delicious Hellmann's Dijonnaise, well, I knew I was in love.
Oh, nothing beats my Hellmann's Dijonnaise.
Every 3/4 ounce Kraft single is made from 5 ounces of milk. How do they do that?
They take the slice and make it into a rocket, then they shoot it to the Milky Way. And when it gets back, it's buzzed in with milk.
Milk makes Kraft singles taste great.
K-R-A-F-T.
Some people think the only way to keep a carpet looking new is to avoid walking on it. But this is new Master Life. It's made of a tough DuPont fiber that can stand up to even heavy foot traffic and stay beautiful for years.
Hey, Dad. Thanks for the car, Dad.
DuPont Master Life. The more you walk on it, the more you'll like it.
Oh, honey, you're home early.
Call for a Master Life store near you.
A beautiful thief forced into an unholy alliance.
What do you know about diamonds?
I don't come easy or cheap.
Trapped in a double life of danger and deceit.
She needs somebody she thinks she can trust.
In a town like this, she can only trust herself.
You won't have a problem if you do what I say.
No!
The thrilling climax will leave you breathless.
You didn't think I was just gonna let you walk away, did you?
It takes a thief to know a thief. South Beach, the NBC world premiere, Sunday, June 6th.
Hey, you can see why Jay wanted Kevin Pollak back again, along with singer John Cicada. It's The Tonight Show.
You know us, we're the people who live at the end of your bed.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy so shocked the nation in so many ways, we can only imagine the sense of loss felt by Robert Kennedy, the deep, dark, personal grief. After all, he lost a brother that he loved, a man that he'd worked for so long, and in his brother's place, Lyndon Johnson, a man whose political and personal style Bobby Kennedy despised.
You couldn't get to him. It was too deep. You know, it's like somebody who's had a terrible shock to their system and it's in them. It has to come from inside.
He was very strong. We never for a minute thought he could emerge from it.
Jackie Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and the family came to clean out the president's office. There were two guys at the desk from GSA, the government service, trying to figure out who owned what. And I remember Bobby opening up the doors and walking outside. I was in the corner watching it. It was like it was going in slow motion.
Bobby would work late at the Justice Department. Frequently, he would go over to Arlington in the evening, where he would just stand quietly or pray quietly by his brother's grave.
The thought passed through his mind that just as Lyndon Johnson had been John Kennedy's vice presidential candidate, maybe Robert Kennedy should be Lyndon Johnson's vice presidential candidate.
I mean, it's oil and water. How could it have worked? He just thought he was a little crude and coarse, and that really didn't appeal to Bobby.
Lyndon Johnson hated Bob Kennedy. Loved John Kennedy, hated Bob Kennedy.
With reference to the selection of the candidates for vice president on the Democratic ticket, I've reached the conclusion that it would be inadvisable for me to recommend to the convention any member of the cabinet.
Well, he was only doing that to stop Bobby from running for vice president.
In August of 1964, he saw that his options had narrowed. He very much wanted to get out of Washington and out of the Johnson administration.
Many leading members of the Democratic and the Liberal Party here in the state of New York have talked to me about being a candidate for the United States Senate. I've decided to make myself available for the nomination of the Democratic State Convention.
I remember going to Rochester, New York. He gave sort of his standard speech about why he was running for the Senate, and then he stopped. And he said, "You've been through a very difficult time in this city. I've been through a very difficult time, too, in my life." The crowd was absolutely silent, and then you just began to hear the rumble of applause, and then this incredible applause and roar and cheer.
When Robert Kennedy came to the United States Senate, it was a very historic moment because his brother had served there.
You look like
Teddy had come to the Senate temporarily, but then had to run again in Massachusetts in '64, so he and Robert were sworn in together at that same occasion.
It was difficult for him because he was sort of a fighter. And you can't be a fighter in the Senate, I don't think.
Is there any time in the next couple of hours we can have any kind of a chat for 10 or 15 minutes?
From what I see, I think you have to be more of a compromiser to get things accomplished, and that wasn't very much his nature.
He certainly did not, when he first ran for the Senate, expect to be in the Senate all his life.
I was contacted by Senator Kennedy's office, and I was asked if I'd be interested in taking the senator up a mountain in the Yukon. Mount Kennedy is the highest unclimbed peak in Canada at that time. I said, well, the mountain has never been climbed before. Bobby, though, wanted to do it. 14,000 feet, a beautiful mountain up where the ice worms wiggle their purple heads in the crust of the pale blue snow. I thought we'd be terribly lucky to get the senator from the state of New York up the highest unclimbed mountain in Canada. And so I talked to him about that. And he said, well, yes, I'm practicing running up and down the stairs and hollering help. I never talked to Bobby about why he was doing it. I knew that he had a couple of strong agendas to do the mountain that was named after his brother. So we began to climb across the glaciers, moving up to the next camp, roped up. You wear ropes so that if one person might fall in a crevasse, they won't go too far down the crevasse. I'm in lead, number one on the rope. Bobby was second, and I hear him coming up alongside of me, breathing hard, but in a rhythmic pace, and I wanted to set a guide pace. He kept wanting to go faster, so I said, sure, so we'll go faster. And then I thought, okay, we'll tire him out. And then he'll slow down. We never tired him out. So we're coming up this very beautiful ridge that drops off a couple of 1,000 feet on each side, and it went up into the summit of the mountain, the final section. And then we were about 30 feet from the summit. I said, all right, Bobby, there's the top. Go ahead. And he said, no, you should go, Jim, you're the leader. And I said, no, I won't go. I said, you must go first. This is the peak. This is your mountain. This is your brother's mountain. This is for you to do. We let him be alone on the summit. His head was bowed, and we were in tears from what we knew of what he was thinking. That was a great moment because he was the first in history to stand on that little piece of earth that was so beautiful. It was wonderful.
She's gonna love this.
Happy birthday, Lauren.
Introducing Hallmark's Personalize It, a new kind of card you make right in the store.
This Tuesday, you'll finally be 29.
Wait, wasn't she 29 last year?
Fill in a name or write it all yourself.
Come to think of it, Lauren's been 29 as long as I've known her.
For the store nearest you, just call 1-800-HALLMARK.
Happy birthday, Lauren. This Tuesday, you'll finally be 29. Again.
That works.
Hallmark has the ways to say you care.
What is big?
Gee, that's much bigger.
Nothing's bigger than the big G's, only $8.88 at Little Caesars.
Pizza. To celebrate Buick's 90th anniversary, we proudly introduce the 90th anniversary LeSabre. LeSabre has a proven reputation for quality and the highest pre-sale value in its class. Now you get all this Buick quality, comfort, and elegance at a special anniversary price. The 90th anniversary Buick LeSabre. Quality its competition just can't hold a candle to.
You know, you don't have to be a pro to shop at Sherwin-Williams. In fact, they're having a do-it-yourself sale right now with Classic 99 interior flat at just $12.99. It ends June 26th, so if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you better get going.
Look what's in the ice cream section.
Total indulgence, zero guilt. Total indulgence, zero guilt.
Weight Watchers chocolatey caramel nut bars. Creamy ice milk, all gooey with caramel and peanuts, too. One totally cool taste in the ice cream section from Weight Watchers.
Total indulgence, zero guilt.
Talk about fun. We're supposed to talk about fun.
Okie dokie, I'll be right back.
Take two. Talk about a spasmo. Can we get somebody else to do his lines?
Take 9.
Let's talk fun.
Okay, June 14th.
NBC.
Daytime television will never be the same.
Celebrities.
I'm ready.
Surprises.
All kinds of good stuff.
If you're looking for distinction and value in a luxury automobile, the answer is the special edition Cadillac DeVille. Equipped with luxurious options such as Phaeton roof, gold ornamentation, and leather seating areas. At a savings of $1,490 plus a $2,000 bonus direct from Cadillac for a total of $3,490. The special edition Cadillac DeVille. See your Cadillac Super Network dealers.
the start of summer savings at the Sears Brand Central Memorial Day sale. Get deals like this Kenmore side-by-side refrigerator with water, ice, and crushed ice through the door. A whopping 22 cubic feet is just $999.99 at Sears Brand Central.
Getting elected to the U.S. Senate gave Bobby Kennedy his own political base, but moving to the Capitol at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue is not easy when you've been in the White House as the president's strong right arm, when the president was your brother, and now he's gone. So Bobby Kennedy was a restless soul in the Senate, a condition exacerbated by his growing doubts about the war in Vietnam, a war that he once vigorously defended.
As we move ahead with this war, and as it becomes more bloody and more difficult, and we become more involved, that we should know what our political objectives are and apply only that amount of military power to accomplish those political objectives, and not more military power than is necessary.
Robert Kennedy was making thoughtful statements, raising fundamental questions about our involvement in Vietnam. He was a believer in the Vietnam policy in those days. So he told me one day that it was personally very difficult and very painful for him to reverse course on that issue.
He gradually became more and more a critic of the war. The murder of his brother forced him at age 38, which is later in life than most of us face these questions about who am I, what do I believe in, what are my goals, beginning his pilgrimage of self-discovery. I remember going with him to Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is a poor black ghetto in Brooklyn. I remember asking him, standing in front of the house I grew up in on Vernon Avenue, I said, well, what would have happened to you if you grew up where I grew up? And he looks up and down the block and says, I probably would have become a juvenile delinquent.
He had become much more sensitive of the have-nots, to minorities and to the poor, and obviously had a very special place for children. And it encouraged them to come and see the suffering directly in Mississippi. And so a subcommittee did, in fact, come down, and Senator Kennedy came as a part of that.
What do you have for lunch?
We had lunch, yeah.
You haven't had lunch yet?
He would always kind of touch, or in a tactile way, be able to kind of say what he liked or express a feeling or a caring just by touching a child. We went into a very poor home with a mother working in the corner and a child sitting down on a dirty mud floor and with a bloated belly, and watching him being terribly shocked and very moved and touching and trying to get the child to respond and being visibly angry. But he had that sense of moral outrage, and he acted on it.
We were all sitting at the dinner table, which we have a lovely dining room, and the linen was set, and
We were all sort of yelling and screaming and, arguing about passing the chocolate milk or whatever. And all of a sudden, the door opened.
He was shaken in a way that I hadn't seen him shaken before, and said,
I want you to do something to help those children. You've got to help those children.
And he said, I've seen kids live, families live, in rooms the size of this dining room, with their stomachs distended. Do you know how lucky you are? Do you know how lucky you are?
On this Monday morning in Vietnam, United States aircraft have resumed action in North Vietnam.
By 1967, we were engaged, of course, in continuous, unremitting bombing of the North. And so you had young people on college campuses, you had people of conscience all over the country beginning to stand up, take to the streets, express themselves in opposition to the war. It was really reaching a crescendo by the middle of 1967.
It seems to me if we want to go to the negotiating table, we can get there now by taking the action of stopping the bombing in North Vietnam.
Robert Kennedy gives a speech in which he calls for the end to the bombing and in which he turns the next corner. People begin to talk to him about running for president.
I intend to enter the Democratic primaries.
At the time Gene McCarthy announced in November of '67, Bob was resisting any efforts that he ran. When he heard that Gene McCarthy was going to run, he was startled and alarmed. He saw time running out on the possibility of a reconsideration later.
The events in 1968 changed everything rather dramatically. First of all, you had the Tet Offensive at the end of January in 1968.
What surprised me is that they could carry that fight right into the American embassy in Saigon. They were on the roof of that embassy.
The Tet Offensive made it very clear that all of the statements that had been made by the President and General Westmoreland about Vietnam were just so much fantasy, and that this was going to be a long and enduring and continuing struggle.
I saw Bobby in the cloakroom either the day after the Tet Offensive or shortly thereafter. And I remember him saying, this is it, you know, they're not going to quit.
It is, it seems to me, a time for truth. We must first of all rid ourselves of the illusion that the events of the past 2 weeks represent some sort of victory.
He was becoming more and more zealous on the Vietnam question, and less adamant about not running.
In terms of votes counted and authenticated from today's New Hampshire presidential primary elections, there is little suspense about the ultimate winners.
People say McCarthy won New Hampshire, he didn't. Lyndon Johnson on a write-in beat him by a percentage point or two. But that was a real triumph because it was a near victory and it was a deep upset to the political establishment and to the Democrats and to Lyndon Johnson.
When the results of New Hampshire came, he saw that people were turned off by the war. And then he thought, well, hey, I care about the war and I care a lot about a lot of other things in this country, so I thought he should run.
I was against him running. I just had the concerns about the whole issues of safety, and I just had an unease about the race. I don't know.
I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to propose new policy.
She hasn't seen Richard in months. She's almost forgotten his smile. Train is 4 hours late. Her name is Alyssa. And she's constipated. Get over it. Get X-Lax. It's a pill, it's gentle, and it works. Get X-Lax. Get regular.
This royal throne of kings, this happy breed of men, this earth of majesty,
this little world.
The airline that's uniting the world. United brings you non-stop service from 6 U.S. cities to London's Heathrow and the land of poets.
This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England.
Come fly the friendly skies.
Obviously, giving up showers is not an option, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep my skin's moisture from going down the drain. New Oil of Olay Bath Bar is very different. Of course, it's got light Olay moisture like young skin, but get this. Unlike soap, it actually helps hold moisture in, so my skin feels soft, smooth, wonderfully young. Suddenly, showers have a whole new meaning.
Hold on to young skin with new Oil of Olay Bath Bar. And the price? Very nice.
Country crock churn style. The taste reminds me of Mom's butter on the farm. I loved growing up with that sweet butter taste.
Introducing new churn style sticks. Sweet, buttery taste with fewer calories and no cholesterol.
It's Domino's Pepperoni Cheddar Doubleheader.
Buy a large pepperoni pizza at regular price, get an extra layer with cheddar cheese and extra pepperoni free. Plus a free 2-quart pack of Kool-Aid drink mix with any medium or large pizza order.
Something for nothing.
How about that?
Oh, that was wonderful.
I have to see it. If a movie got great reviews, you'd go see it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely fantastic.
If everyone kept talking about a book, you'd probably read it.
It was brilliant.
And if Automobile Magazine called this Toyota Camry the best car built in America, you'd give it a test drive, right? The 1993 Toyota Camry. Everything you've heard is true.
She's an honor student, straight A's, yet she flunked a simple test, home pregnancy. Think it can't happen to your child? Think again.
Sometimes you want to chuck it all and just be a kid again?
All the time.
Kids having kids. What's a parent to do? America Close Up has some answers on NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, Monday.
Saturday, from the creator of Molly Dodd, comes a sexy new series.
I want you more than pizza.
It's a light, cool summer treat.
I'm wearing your shorts.
A quirky comedy that treats viewers like grown-ups.
You want me to talk dirty to you?
Whoa.
You're invited to a black tie affair at 10, 9 Central. NBC Saturday.
Hey, count me in.
When I was in the 4th grade, I thought being the loudest kid in class meant you were the smartest. My teachers didn't have it easy. Most teachers don't. And teaching is even tougher now. Budgets aren't big enough, classes aren't small enough, but somehow teachers manage to teach. And they even manage to reach kids who don't have much support outside the classroom. For that, and much more, they deserve our thanks. Thanks!
When Robert Kennedy got involved in the presidential campaign of 1968, it was high drama. Lyndon Johnson was playing the part of King Lear in the White House. Vice President Hubert Humphrey, his loyal and faithful heir, who had been defeated by John Kennedy 8 years earlier. And then there was Gene McCarthy, brilliant and abrasive and disdainful of the Kennedys. On the other side, another who had been defeated by John Kennedy, making a comeback, Richard Nixon. Bob Kennedy was a late starter, but he was quickly the protagonist, and then the tragic hero.
Our guest today on Meet the Press is Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York, who yesterday declared his candidacy for the Democratic nomination for the presidency of the United States.
We went out to Kansas State to speak. Incredible crowds. When he came off after the first speech, he said to me, "Free at last."
We have looked upon the conflict in South Vietnam as just a military conflict.
The campaign was very liberating for him.
It is a political and a diplomatic conflict.
He was on his own.
I stand with those who want a new effort to end the war in Vietnam.
The strength that we have.
I think we can accept the fact that there are the violence and the lawlessness.
The basic question of whether we as black and white citizens in the United States are going to be able to live together. We can find, arrange in our society and in our government ways in which we can feed starving children in the United States. And I say that we have to have a change.
at his apartment here in New York on March 31st, 1968. And we had come together to watch Johnson's speech.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Tonight I want to speak to you of peace in Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
It was a stunning speech. It was not expected.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Robert Kennedy understood immediately what that meant. You take Johnson out of the equation, and you've taken the heart out of the issue of Vietnam. And that Hubert Humphrey would then come on board.
Well, I believe the president made it quite clear in a statement that he was going to remain out of politics during the remainder of his term. I'm going to the American people, as I have, and present my views and my ideas about what we need to do in the future.
The date was April the 4th, and everybody was excited about Robert Kennedy coming in the city that night.
We landed at the Indianapolis airport, and somebody raced in and said, Martin Luther King's been shot.
He had that stricken look on his face like it was Jack all over again. I remember the local police coming and saying they were going to escort him directly to the hotel. And he said, no, I'm going to the inner city. And they said, well, you can't go there because there's violence and the people are upset and we won't let you go there. And he said, well, I'm going.
He didn't say anything the first second or two. Finally, he said, I have some bad, sad news.
And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
It was like the clock stopped. Nobody could hear a pin drop. I was kind of angry.
For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man.
It was an absolutely fantastic speech, and it had a great influence on the black population there. They walked away from there, went home, prayed, thought, but didn't riot, as they did in most of the other cities of America.
He came to visit with me during that period from the assassination day to the funeral. And he offered to invite Jackie to come to the funeral if that would be helpful to me, and I suggested to him that it
would. He probably was the last white politician of that period that literally could walk the streets behind the body of Martin Luther King Jr.
That was one of the highlights of the campaign and great memories. It was just nice, you know, rowing on a train through the countryside and singing songs.
That was a good day. The press made up a mock song mocking him about, they called him the Ruthless Cannonball.
But his high-born days are over, he's headed for a fall. They're noted for long memories on the ruthless cannonball.
The first two primaries that Kennedy was facing were not exactly Kennedy country. You had Indiana.
I ask for your support.
Then the next primary was Nebraska, a week later. Again, not a state with lots of big urban votes. Kennedy wound up winning in a landslide in that state.
During the Oregon primary, McCarthy kept asking Bobby to do a debate with him. Bobby didn't want to do a debate with him.
Yeah, let those Kennedy people out of here. How are you there?
Bobby lost the Oregon primary. Crushing blow was the first time
he had ever lost anything. And I remember asking him, I said, why did you lose Oregon? And he just shrugged and said, there's not enough poor people and there are too many hunters.
And it was the first time a Kennedy ever lost a campaign, so he felt very badly about that. He felt he'd let the family down as well as his supporters.
And that's why when we went to California, we really were on the edge of either him becoming the candidate for president or not the candidate for president.
I'm happy to be back in California. I know that it'll be a difficult campaign. And with your help, we're going to win the election in November and turn this country around. I ask for your help. I ask for your assistance.
He was pretty physically out of gas. He had used it all up, but he thought he could win it.
The night of the California primary, when Robert Kennedy's victory was clear, the excitement and enthusiasm in his hotel room in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles was palpable.
I believe that the final totals will be Kennedy 48%, Senator McCarthy 41%.
Bobby had won California. He believed he was going to be the nominee for president.
Senator Kennedy is going to come down here in about 10-15 minutes, so just be patient.
It was the zenith of euphoria.
I thank all of you who made this possible this evening. My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you very much.
We were going to go out through the crowd, which he always did, and I guess he was too tired. He jumped down. Ethel called to us because the stage was 2-3 feet above the ground, and she didn't want to jump down because, among other things, she was pregnant. I went back and we helped her down. And then she said, go on. And so we ran off to get alongside him, but we heard the shots as we were running.
Is there a doctor? Is there everybody? Please come right here. If there's a doctor in the house, I want to see him right here. Everybody else, please stay back. Please stay back. Everybody else, just please stay back. Let's go. Doctor, stay back.
There were scores of people who had heard the shot who were running in the other way, and I had to fight my way through them. Then suddenly I walked there, and there's Bobby Kennedy on the ground, shot.
Coming up, a group of protesters rushed the president's hotel and refused to leave.
Scattered violence in Miami. A cop is cleared of manslaughter charges and walks away a free man.
These stories in the first 11 minutes. Plus, stuck in town for the holiday, looking for a little fun. We'll tell you where to find it.
The news tonight is next.
What's up, Jake? What up? Where's Calvin? At the J.O.B., man. What? He's still flipping those burgers at Mickey D's?
Thanks, Calvin.
He says he has a plan, man. Meet the newest member of our management team, Calvin.
Congratulations.
All right. Over here, my boy, too. I like that. Yo, Calvin. May we help you? Nothing much, man. Well, I'm out. Hey, yo, Calvin. Now, what's the word on that job thing? Not for me. For a friend of mine. Word.
Maybe you never thought of an airbag being custom-made for a minivan. But that's how we build the Mazda MPV. Because we just thought making safety customary might appeal to you.
It's where you thought they'd gone to retire, maybe to play shuffleboard.
But they had other ideas, and now they're why most of your calls go to the same area code. Call AT&T now, and you could pay less for them. Spend $40 or more a month, we'll take 25% off your favorite area code, plus 15% off your other calls. Guaranteed, with no fee. But you have to call 1-800-426-iPlan. Real savings made simple. Just another part of the iPlan.
Worried about losing your job? Cancel your plans this Sunday night. We'll be on NBC at 8 p.m. Eastern and Pacific, 7 p.m. Central and Mountain Time, talking about the Mexican trade agreement that will cost this country millions of jobs. Listen, learn, vote. Don't miss it.
To order Robert F. Kennedy, The Man and the Memories on video cassette, please call 1-800-851-6161 or send your check or money order to Robert F. Kennedy, Columbia House, Department TRC, 1400 North Fruit Ridge Avenue, Terre Haute, Indiana, 47811. That's 1-800-851-6161. Call now to order Robert F. Kennedy, The Man and the Memories.
Bobby Kennedy died in a Los Angeles hospital in the early morning hours of June 6, 1968. He was 42 years old. Senator Humphrey won the Democratic presidential nomination and lost a very close race to Richard Nixon in the fall. The Vietnam War continued for another 1,757 days. From June 1968 to the end of that war, another 26,293 Americans died in Vietnam. We cannot know, of course, whether Bobby Kennedy would have been elected president or whether he would have succeeded in that so difficult office. His death was a reminder of the cruelty of fate, of history. But even without the White House, Bobby Kennedy's legacy cannot be denied. There was never ever a moment in American political life quite like the Bobby Kennedy funeral train from New York to Washington. What do you remember about that?
Besides the unspeakable loss, just really being with the children, you know, with him for the last time.
And the people who gathered along the way, do you remember looking out in those crowds?
Yes, and thinking, wasn't it amazing that one person really could make a difference, because on one side of the tracks would be the white people, and on the other side would be the black people. And you just thought, here was a man who brought them together.
Well, it was an outpouring of an extraordinary sentiment. Incredibly sad, obviously, but he would have appreciated, you know, the people who did come, the kind of people that came, the children, the others.
Tough now even for you to think back on that time.
Well, I remember the best of times. Try not to get into some of the others.
I know it's very difficult for you, but when you returned from California and Bobby was gone, how did you feel about your life together and what you'd had?
It was, I thought I'd had the best, and that I'd been so lucky.
Hi, folks. Jay Leno. Join me tonight. My guest will be Kevin Pollak, the music of John Cicada, and from CNN, Judy Woodruff. You know, Kevin's really funny.
Next week on Today, an alternative to conventional medicine that might cure you.